Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. So excited to be hanging with you and with this panel that's going to be joining me in a moment. I don't normally wear hoodies for literary events, but here I am, built in Brampton proud. My name is Jael Richardson. I'm the executive director at the Festival of Literary Diversity. I'm also your host and your moderator for today. This event's going to run for about 75 minutes, after which there'll be time to chat on the platform in the chat corner. We're pleased to offer closed captioning technology today, and for all of our sessions, you can turn that on pressing the closed caption button at the bottom, or you can turn it off, whatever works for you. The Fold takes place on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded Indigenous territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee nations, also known as Brampton. As we acknowledge the land, we also commit to increasing our own awareness, our own understanding, and conscientious action. We're committed to making this space safe for all those who share a mutual care and respect for others, and we encourage all of our guests to do the same, to honor the space by respecting those who have gathered here as well. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for supporting the Fold. In particular, I want to shout out a few Brampton spots. We want to thank the City of Brampton for sponsoring us through their granting programs. We're very blessed. And I also want to thank the Rose, who you saw in the picture, the graphic for this event, where we normally host and hold the festival. I also want to thank Brampton Library and the Peel Art Gallery, Museum, and Archives, both of which have been major partners for us at the festival since the very beginning. I'm going to introduce you to our panelists today. I'll be your moderator, as I mentioned. You can read a little bit about me there on the screen if you like, but I'm going to spend my time focusing on our panelist. Some people, I should say, have asked why I wasn't on the panel with the panelists, but I'm actually born and raised in Mississauga. I've come to Brampton later in life, so I'm really excited to talk to our panelists today. Trey Anthony is an award-winning writer, motivational speaker, and relationship life coach. Louisa Onomé is a Nigerian-Canadian writer of books for teens. Ian Williams is a poet and fiction writer whose most recent books are Word Problems and Reproduction, which you may or may not know won the Giller Prize. They're each going to read for you now. So please join me in listening to Trey Anthony, Louisa Onomé, and Ian Williams.
Thank you. My mother burst into the room. It was 7:30. Trey, 7:30 p.m. is his bedtime. You need to do better. I felt this quiet rage rise in me, and I tried to bite my lip, but this time I had to say something. With my voice barely a whisper, I stated, "I'm not doing well, Mom." My mother, pretending that she didn't hear me, didn't make eye contact and headed to the bathroom to busy herself with running the baby's bath. I handed the baby to my sister who had entered the room. Then I followed my mother, desperately trying to get her to look at me. The tearful words tumbled out without any warning. "Mom, I'm really not doing well. I don't think I can do this." I sat on the edge of the bathtub as a wave of emotions overtook me. I needed for her to see this pain. I needed to be okay to release it. The tears seemed to explode from someplace buried within me. Giant tears ran down my face, and my mother couldn't ignore it any longer. Awkwardly, she came over to pat me on the shoulder, which is the closest my mother has ever come to physical tenderness with me, and I knew she was trying her best. She didn't look at me, but instead focused on a spot above my eyes. I knew she didn't want to fully witness my tears or the pain in my eyes. This was already too much for her. "Trey, you're going to be fine. You must remember whose child you are. Remember your grandmother, remember me. We had it way worse, and we never gave up. You can't let this break you." And yes, my mother's solemn pep talk gave me some comfort, but I also recognized at that moment that my mother was not comfortable with my vulnerability or my emotion. My mother knew how to teach me how to be strong, but she didn't know how to teach me to feel all my feelings, express them, live with them, acknowledge them, and sit with them. My mother could be my cheering squad, my person who reminded me to keep my chin up, but she couldn't be my safe, soft spot. She could not be the place where I could fall apart. And right then, I needed to fall apart.
If this were back in the day, I would get on my bike and ride down to the old house where that couple used to live. But now I press my feet into my shoes and start jogging. It's more difficult to jog all the way there now, past the rows of houses and around the main street. There used to be a cool ice cream place over here and a different burger place over there, but they're all gone now. Even that cash and carry turned salon turned I don't know place looks as if it'll be vacant soon. There are a lot of the shops that are boarded up and others with for sale signs on the front door. Some of the signs are new, and I hate that I slow my jog a little to try and read them. Reeser and McKenzie and Hillcrest, all these real estate companies swooping in at the last second to buy up our stores. I can't even be mad because we let them do it. The group of houses with the dead old couple's house is gone. Beau's house too. I joke about it, but to see its absence puts a new kind of emptiness in my chest. It's so messed up because I can remember the long, uneven stone walkway we used to trip over during Halloween, and I remember the way the front step used to creak with the wind. I'm squinting at the place in front of me, trying to, I don't know, get it to come back or something. Things close here and there on the main road and people move away, but this was a whole house, a whole block that just isn't here anymore. Instead, it's been replaced with a sprawling building that has huge glass doors, the kind that probably open when you get close to them. Thank you.
Hi, good night, everyone. I'm reading from Word Problems. I'm reading the last poem in the book. It's called Post-Traumatic, and it begins with an epigraph from Lydia Davis, the American short story writer. Unless to feel something towards someone is in fact to do something to that person. At Liberty Cafe, a white mother is playing I Spy with her white son. The son says, I spy with my little eye something black. The mother makes a game of considering. There's a black man sitting in their field. The mother looks out the window and says, car, wire, bicycle, road, and somewhat desperately, awning. The child says no to each guess. She turns inside and labels things. Coat, picture frame, mug, shoelace. The child says no. Can someone be something?
Thank you all for those readings. I love getting to hear those readings at the beginning. It always gets me excited about the conversation, thinking about the stories that you've written, the pieces that I've read. And so I just want to start. Well, first of all, I should tell everyone, I warned the panelists that our panel today is going to be a mix. There's going to be questions about their writing. There's going to be also some Brampton throwback memories and reflections thrown in there as well. And so for those of you who are tuning in who have never been to Brampton, Brampton is a suburb just outside of Toronto to the west. It's super easy to get to Toronto. The border is like a blurry street that you just cross over and suddenly you're in Toronto. But people from Brampton know they're from Brampton and they know where that border is and where that crossing is. I've been particularly proud to call Brampton home. And it's home to, I think the official number is somewhere in the 700,000s population, but it's a really big, well-populated space with a lot of different people. And so I want to start by just getting all of you to share what your time frame for Brampton was, when you were here, what schools you went to, that kind of thing, just to get us situated in when you were here, because I think we've all kind of moved in and out of this place. So I'll start with you, Louisa.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because in your introduction you said because you were like born and raised in Mississauga. So I lived in Mississauga until I was like 11. And then I came here to the side where it's like mainly new development. So I feel like I didn't know much about the city up until like the end of high school, beginning of university, oddly enough, because where I lived was just like all new developments. So I went to a middle school called Earnscliffe. And then I went to a school called Treeline. And then I switched and I went to Catholic school and I went to St. Marguerite de Ville. Back when it was just like the school and then there was like a farm across the street, so there was nothing. Yeah, and so it's been since I was 11 is when I've been in the city.
I feel like there's a common thing too, to move to a place that's new, there's nothing around it, and then you go back years later and you're like, is this the same place?
It's really weird. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah. Ian, what about you?
So we started off in Heart Lake in the late 80s, and Heart Lake was relatively new, right, back then. And I went to Conestoga Public School for elementary school, then Sir John A. At Center Street for middle school. So yeah, we moved to right like in the middle of the city there. Yeah, and I just remember all the catwalks and stuff. It's all there in reproduction, right, in the novel. And then after that, up to Bramalea for a while, went to Mayfield High School, down somewhere else on Kennedy Road for a bit. And now we're in those new developments. Well, at least my mom is, right, down at like Williams Parkway and down that way. So yeah, a little bit of all over the city.
You got that's a good smattering of locations there. That's good. I find a lot of people too, even if they've been in Brampton a long time, it's like the same postal code. Like my husband has lived like 5 houses down from Main Street, wherever he was, it was somewhere down like here, Ontario, Main Street. So that's good. Yeah, Trey.
I moved to Brampton from Rexdale in grade 11. So I did my high school years in Brampton. I went to Notre Dame High School. We lived at Kennedy and Bovaird. And at that time, when I went to Notre Dame High School, I think there was about maybe 15 Black people in the school. And all of us sat at the same lunch table every single day. And we all knew each other. And all of the Black kids just hung out with each other. And so it was just a really cool experience. And I was school president from grade 11, 12, and 13. So now I'm aging myself because we used to have OAC, right? So that's kind of how I grew up in Brampton. So I love Brampton. I always claim Brampton. Yeah.
Love that. And you were recently inducted into the Brampton Arts Walk of Fame. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations, but still really proud of that. I want to start actually with you, Trey, with a question about your book. I have followed your career for a really long time. I actually auditioned for Kink in My Hair. Like I am from like way back in the day. So you've done the Kink in My Hair. I saw How Black Mothers Say I Love You. And now you have this, there are other pieces in there that you have done. Those were just the ones I was thinking about. And now you have Black Girl in Love with Herself, this nonfiction book. And so I want to know what led you into nonfiction, having done all these things in playwriting and television. What made you want to put together this particular book?
For me, it was about growth and it was about evolution. And I've been a big person who's always been really big on self-help. I don't think there's a self-help book that I haven't read. And I was a big fan of Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And I was doing a lot of meditating, a lot of affirming, and I was following Wayne Dyer and all of those other self-help people and Gabrielle Bernstein. And I realized that as much as I could relate to some of the self-help messaging, there were some things, especially as a Black woman, that did not resonate with me. And so, for example, like the book Lean In with Sheryl Sandberg, when she was saying, oh, as women, we need to lean in and speak up for ourselves. And I was just like, yeah, but as a Black woman, if I leaned in, I would be called aggressive. I would be called intimidating. I would be called angry. And then there was stuff around when Brene Brown started talking about vulnerability. I said, yes, I truly believe we need to be vulnerable. But as Black women, there's another layer that we're not talking about because we are fighting against that trope of the strong Black woman. And that strong Black woman has helped us a lot of us get to where we are right now in our careers and in our lives, but it's also killing us. And so for me, I was going through this huge transformation mentally, physically, and emotionally. And I wanted to write the book that I wanted to read that really addressed what it's like as a Black woman walking through this world, and what self-help and mental wellness looks like for us as Black women. And I couldn't find that anywhere. So it was kind of like, write the book that you want to read. And that's how Black Girl in Love with Herself came about.
I love that. I love it too, because it was such a theme I found when I saw how Black mothers say I love you. It was, those were the things that were so lovely to see on the stage and perform, these conversations about mental health and wellness from a Black women's perspective. So I see the thread, and I'm really grateful for that. Ian, I want to follow up with this with you, because you've had this hugely successful novel. You were a poet before that who was also successful. You have another poetry collection, but what I'm seeing also, I know that down the road you have this nonfiction piece coming out in the fall as well. And I don't know if it's too early to talk about, but I'm really curious. I feel like there's a real, I don't know if I want to say shift. I don't think it's necessarily a shift, but maybe you feel it's a shift. I feel like there, even in the piece you read and in Word Problems, there's this conversation that's going deeper and deeper and more specific, maybe I'll say. And I'm wondering, is that something that's happening in your writing that surprises you, or is it something you were always kind of working towards even as you were thinking about reproduction, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, well, I know like genre is a bit of an artificial container, right? And there are many things that I want to say and explore. But I think there's a kind of movement that parallels like just aging as well and life. And, you know, when you're young, you play a lot, and poetry is very playful and gives you space, and you're, you know, in your feelings all the time. And so poetry was really a great vehicle, and is a great vehicle for that. And the fiction, big and ambitious and all of that. But there was a moment last year in the summer when we all know what was going on in the States. And I was just like, I need to speak directly, right? Like without story, without narrative, without anything distracting or gymnastics. Like, I just want to speak really directly from my brain and my experience. And this is where the nonfiction came from, to someone else. And there's no need to sort of, you know, pretend that we're in like a play space or something, right? It was just too serious, I think, to treat or to create another layer, right? I wanted to strip all the layers away. I think in my career to this point, there have been lots of pleasure in the layers and the layering. And I just wanted to show my skin, right? For a while, like enough of the clothing and stuff. I just wanted to show my skin. So that's where what the nonfiction is going to feel like, I think, in the fall.
I love that. I love it too, because I think I've kind of done the opposite in that I kind of like showed all the skin, and then I was interested in layering. So I love the idea that like it's come for you in a different direction.
Yeah.
And I want to take it to Louisa with that too, because you've come out with this young adult novel like Home, which definitely deals with a lot of the things, the issues that are going on right now, politically, socially. And so what is it about young adult that felt like the right vehicle, the right way to arrive as an author?
Yeah, I think young adult can be so exciting because it really comes from that kind of new and fresh perspective. I just think back to like when I was a teenager, and it's like I think it's like the last time you really get to experience a lot of these firsts, and everything is kind of like you see everything with all these like it's like a fresh perspective and all these things you're experiencing for the first time. And so I thought it'd be really interesting. But at the same time, I really kind of wanted to tackle this subject through young adult, because I felt like in terms of like just like knowing what was going on and really understanding a lot of like whether it's like the critical theory beneath all of those things, that I just didn't know a whole lot. And I thought that coming at it through the angle of like a 16-year-old girl would have been a bit more genuine to my understanding as well. Yeah, just trying to kind of be, I think, authentic and honest. And that's kind of where the YA part came from.
Well, I'm going to come up to our first spin question that has nothing to do with your books. And one day we'll be back in Brampton for Fold, and people will come from all over into the city to go to events in person. And when they do, one of the things that I love the most about Brampton is our food. There is like great food. The signs and the actual buildings aren't always the nicest, but the food. And so someone's coming. The scenario is someone's coming to Brampton for the festival. They have a little bit of time. They need to get something to eat. Where do you send them to eat? And it can be a place that still currently exists or used to exist and you wish it still did.
All right, I don't even remember the name of this place, so you have to help me with this, Jael. So there's a place like on Orenda on the back streets. It's an Indian place where you can get like samosas and sweets. It's like in an industrial park. Like if you're going, if you're driving
I know
east,
where
it's
you
going to
are.
be on the north side. I think it's called like Minar or Mindar or something like that.
Yep. I
Um,
don't know the names. I usually am just like on a renta, turn right at this sign.
That's right.
Like,
It's
how
in
I
the
can-
back in one of these like industrial malls and plazas there, but just all of these Indian sweets like laid out in like rows and just a bit of harsh light on them.
Mm.
Yeah, just great. We used to like I remember sometimes I would be like driving home with my mom from her job or whatever. And you know it's late, it's a winter afternoon and you're hungry and whatever, and you just pull in there, duck out of the traffic for a little bit, look at the beautiful like food, get some samosas, get back on the road and go
Mhm.
home. Yeah.
Nothing like a greasy bag of samosas.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and Manar Fine Indian Cuisine. We've got it in the chat there. So make notes, yo.
There you go.
Trey or Louisa?
I'm a very big fan of Nando's, which I know isn't Brampton specific, but we are very fortunate, I think, to have one in the city because not every city has a Nando's. And I love them. They're just like flame grilled chicken with this specific sort of spicy sauce that's called peri peri sauce, which came from Portugal, but essentially came from South Africa. And I'm obsessed with them. And they're on Beauvert in here, Ontario, which is really cool because across the street, there's like the chapters. So you can kind of just go to both, which is always really great. That's my favorite intersection in the entire city.
And you should like, Brampton has a very large Portuguese population, very
Yeah.
large. When Portugal won Euro Cup, or
Oh my
it
gosh.
was bananas, Great. Trey, where do you send people to eat when they come to Brampton?
Oh my gosh, it's been so long. There used to be a West Indian spot right next to the barbershop creators. I think it was on Vauden. I can't remember, but it had some of the best noodles. They used to do this kind of like chicken stir fry West Indian style and Guyanese style noodles. And I just loved it. I can't remember the name of it. I just know it was by Cut Creators. And that was the spot I went to. And then if I'm going to get really sentimental, every Friday, my grandmother and grandfather used to take us to the Swiss Chalet. And I just thought it was the best thing ever, was Swiss Chalet and getting that rotisserie chicken and that gravy. And so to this day, I'm in the States right now. I still crave Swiss Chalet. Like that's the first thing I buy when I get off the plane.
Love it. My two favorites have to be Tinnell's, like patties and cocoa bread.
Cool.
And also McKay's Pizza. I'm a big fan of McKay's Pizza. So those are my two, like swing down, you can get them in between a panel.
Where's the Patty and Cocoa Bread place? Is this the
Patty
one
and
on
Cocoa Bread
Kennedy?
place. Kennedy, yeah. Kennedy and Queen, yeah.
Yeah, my brother, when he went to Central Peel, would buy lunch at this place right there, right? Patty and Cocoa Bread, right? Every few days.
All right, another writing question. And this one has to do with place and how you decide where and how much you talk about the places that you're from. I'm going to start with you, Louisa, because I know you went to high school in Brampton. The story isn't actually set in Brampton. It's set in the US actually. And so how much of the place, of how much does Brampton fit into your writing in terms of the setting, either naming it specifically or just shaping where you begin, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So my story, like the suburb I created, Ginger East, is actually like a fictional suburb, but it's based in Canada. And that was for me pretty intentional, just because I feel like, especially within the YA space, there's not a lot of books set in Canada. And I feel like not a lot of books talk about how cool like the Toronto area and like the suburbs and all that stuff is. So for me, it was just really important to really almost like hammer that home for people who weren't from here. Because I think growing up in, whether it's like the suburbs or just growing up within this area and like within Brampton, was a pretty unique experience. And I think I'm only recognizing that now the older I get. at the time, like being a teenager, I was very much not really into time and place and all of that. But now I'm realizing that as I was writing the book, like it really did play a huge impact in how I viewed, I guess, just like my development, like my thoughts and all of that, like writing as a 16-year-old. So I would say like fairly, like I really did lean into my high school experience, which was a very sort of like new person coming to Brampton sort of experience while I was writing it.
Ian, I know in reproduction, Brampton plays a really significant role and has a very significant part. Does it also bleed into your poetry? Does it find its way inside those words as well?
Yeah, not literally in terms of the locations and stuff. And a lot of the most recent book, Word Problems, is like Vancouver, right? Experience in Vancouver over in BC. Um, but it's impossible not to be shaped by like growing up where plurality and diversity is the norm rather than the exception. And I think that all of my experience anywhere else in the world that I've been is like in contrast to what I know growing up. So I expect there to be many languages around me. I expect there to be people dressed differently. I expect there to be different rituals and cultural practices. I expect them to be a carabram, right, in every city that I go to. And so when that doesn't happen, I really feel the absence of diversity. So, and that stuff starts to kind of, rattle with your soul and come out in the poetry. So yeah, it's there, not literally, but it's there in just my worldview.
And I know, Trey, you've lived so many places. I mean, you are joining us right now from Florida, but you've lived, you were born in the UK and then you were in Rixdale, you're here. How does place in general, maybe not even specifically Brampton, how does that shape the stories you've told and where you begin in your stories?
For me, every place I've lived pretty much has shown up in my stories. And it's always about also, I think, about movement and shifting. Even in Black Girl in Love with Herself, there's a whole chapter I dedicated to when I moved to Brampton, because that was the very first time for me that I was able to really address what class did for me and the class differences that I noticed with myself and my classmates. Like I was going to school with kids who were getting BMWs for their 16th birthday. They were having cotillions, and my mom was working 3 jobs to try and keep our house afloat. And I remember very clearly, like all of my friends were getting like $10 a day for lunch money, and I was getting $10 a week. And so I was very aware of that. And so in the book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, I talk about how that made me feel. And I didn't have the language to say what I'm experiencing is class differences, but I knew I was different. And that has shaped me on how I've moved through the world of noticing the haves and the have-nots and who gets what based on where you come from, how you speak, what your parents do for a living. And so it's shaped all of my work is around class differences.
Okay, so quick question, just like a simple, there's an event, when you think of this event, it's always like a Brampton thing, like a place that you used to hang out or an event you used to go to. When I was in Mississauga, it was the Bread and Honey Festival. We would go and we would like do these cheap rides and like whatever it is. So when you think of a Brampton event that you go to, what is it? Ian?
I think Chinguacousy Park fireworks.
No!
Yeah, I think, July 1st. We used to live in Bramley, so we just walk over there, and yeah, that's what comes to mind.
Canada Day and
Yeah.
Chinguacousy Park. We have these great parks in Brampton. So one of them is this like, big field. Trey, what do you think of?
I was going to say the exact same thing. Ian read my mind. It definitely was Chinguacousy Park and fireworks. And then there was also that festival that they used to always have with the different pavilions from each country.
Carabram.
Yeah, Carabram. Yeah.
Louisa, what is it for you?
So I was also going to say Chinguacousy Park, but I love, and I know every city has this, but I became really obsessed with like the farmers market during the summertime. And I don't know, I've never been like a huge vegetable person, but I just loved like the community and all of that. And so I think probably both of those, even though I recognize like farmers markets are everywhere, but I like the Brampton one.
Farmers market's good. I think of Cars and Stars too. I don't know if you guys ever read that, but it's like just old cars on the street and they have like
Oh,
Elvis impersonators, just random music, rock music, like all weekend. Anyways, it's a thing. Okay, so one of the things that Ian sort of touched on that's sort of come out in different ways over the course of our conversation is about culture and language. And I think anyone who's lived in Brampton knows, like, you're just regularly exposed to multiple cultures, multiple communities. I think there's something like 200 different like languages that are spoken or something, 200 different cultures that are represented in Brampton. And so I'm curious about how your language, your choice of words, the culture that you represent in your stories, how that's all been, how you manage that. Because when I saw Kink, that was the first time I'd seen patois, I think, on a stage. And when I saw it on TV, again, same thing. And even like Reproduction, like Home, both those books I feel really touch on culture and community. And so tell me a little bit about how you unpacked that in the writing process, how you unpack culture and language and you think about that as you're writing. Louisa?
yeah. Yeah, that was a bit of a struggle for me because I had really wanted to write my story like in a very certain way. So like the slang that kids would use in the city, in Brampton and Toronto, like just in the GTA in general. But because my book is also published in the US, it became a bit of a struggle to be like, okay, if some of this slang is really regional, I had to kind of tweak it and take it out, which was hard because the setting for me was a really important part of my story. And like situating the kids there in that place, like using the language that they used was also really important. So I don't know. I don't know if I have like a good answer to that question. It was a struggle, and I don't know. Yeah, I think I attempted as best I could while trying to be mindful of like different areas. But once again, like it was really important for me to kind of get as much of that as I could in, because I wanted to represent the area that I'm from. So.
And I know your next books are like, there's like a Nigerian wedding novel that's coming.
Yeah, there
Will there
is.
be a chance for you to unpack language and do a little bit more there, do you think?
Yeah, so that book is actually really fun because I wrote a lot of it in the Pidgin dialect that like we speak like at home and stuff. And I was told like not one time did anyone say like, explain this or what does this mean? So I think that way I was able to approach it in a different way than I was with my first book. And so, yeah, with that book, I think I'm just really excited for people to like read it and receive it because I really just kind of wrote it in a weird way, like for myself, but just like without that extra layer of needing to explain, needing to validate my choices. So,
Trey, when you first wrote Kink, when you were doing that work, was there opposition to you using different kinds of language? Has it changed? How is that shaping the way your career plays out?
Definitely. Like when I wrote The Kink in My Hair and the Stacey Ann monologue about a young girl who just came directly from Jamaica to Canada, and Debbie Young, the amazing Debbie Young, played her. And I remember there were so many times that people said, you can't do patois, especially not at the Princess of Wales. Like, I think when we did it in the French, people were like, oh, okay, that's daring. And then they were kind of like, okay, well, we need to slow it down. We need to do. And then I really will have to say and give credit to it was Debbie Young who really fought for it, because I think I would have bent more to maybe water it down a little bit. And Debbie was like, no, this is her voice. This is who we are. And if they don't get every single word, they will understand what we are trying to convey. And then she said something to me that I will never forget. She said, how many times have we sat in their theaters and felt alienated because it wasn't quite our story? So why can they not sit through one monologue, not maybe understanding every single word, but they will feel the emotion? And that's what made things shift for me as a writer, that I was just like, yes, like I need my people to come sometimes and for once see their stories authentically portrayed on stage, unapologetically, and say, this is my story. And even with the book, Black Girl in Love with Herself, so many young girls and women have written to me and said, when you mention like your mother coming and cooking curry chicken for you or stew peas and rice and oxtail, they were like, I just cried at that line because it was the first time I'd seen that in a book of a woman saying my mother came and fed me with the food that I recognized that my Caribbean mother would feed me with. So to me, it's very essential to have our language and culture on our pages because we don't get it often enough.
And it's funny, people don't realize when you have seen yourself reflected or you've seen variations of yourself reflected, what it's like to not. But I know the first time I read something that spoke back to me, I was like, wait, whoa.
Yeah.
The impact is so great. It's why I'm so obsessed with like Fold and doing these things, because it can make such a difference to see yourself there and to see your voice presented. Now, I noticed when you read your mother's voice as you probably hear her, but that's not how the text is written, that wouldn't be the case. But is that how you're writing it? You're hearing her in that way every time you write?
Exactly how I hear her. And even I did an audiobook for this book, and my mother's voice and my grandmother's voice is all in the Jamaican accent. And then at the end of the audiobook, there's also a interview with my mother talking about what it was like for her seeing me have this emotional breakdown as a Black woman and what that meant for her as a West Indian mother, of how she takes care of me. So it's very, very specific. Even in the book, I have chapters that talk about dance hall in the book and what that means for us as Black women to have dance hall music, right? And so there's just a lot of things that I wanted to make it very culturally specific and celebrating our culture, especially as West Indians, Caribbean people, because I think a lot of times when Blackness is given to us, it also is from a Black American perspective. And for me, I know just being a Canadian living in the US, our experiences are similar, but also very, very different.
I grew up in that kind of like dichotomy where my parents were American, and I was like, but it's not the same.
It's not the
We
same.
would go back to visit, and I was like, this is a whole different world. Ian, when I think of language, you are probably one of the first faces that comes to mind, just in terms of like thinking about it, unpacking it, pulling it apart, putting it back together. And you do that. Reproduction, for example, is like this epic of that as a novel. And then you do it also, obviously, in all of your poetry. So how has the languages you've heard, the language you've studied, how is that all weaving itself? I'm thinking especially like, what are you going to do with your nonfiction? How does it all work inside you for a project?
You know, it's really great to hear this conversation here, because I think it a lot, but I don't actually hear it, right? So to have your voice is like externalized. But I think what's important for me, and what Brampton really gave me in the ability to create these voices and these languages, is sensitivity, right? To realize that when we see Black people, it's not just this one single group of Black people. But in Brampton, we've got, Nigerians and Jamaicans and Ghanaians and, from Trinidad and Guyana. And America, right? There's differences within the race. And we see too with Asians, the guy down the street, he's Vietnamese, he's not Chinese, they're Cambodian, they're not Korean, right? There are these differences that matter to people where they come from. And so to really listen to those differences, like within groups, and not just differences between these big created categories, but those tinier things. I think that's where like the truth of like, or authenticity of voice comes from, right? Paying attention to those things.
It's so funny you say that, because I remember when we started Fold, Ian and I would meet together and actually talk about the idea of it before it actually came to be. And one of the things that made Brampton the right place to host it was because diversity is such a big part of everything you do. I coach a soccer team. I'll have 10 different cultures and communities on my team of 10 kids. I'll take my kids to school. There's just so many different people, places, cultures, languages. Even if you have two kids who are from the same country, the language they spoke, the communities they grew up in are totally different. And so it's really exciting. I want to dip into another fun question. And this one is music based. So when you hear blank song, you automatically think of a moment in Brampton. What is that song that's automatically here? And I'll tell you one, I'll give you a minute. I'll share one. I always think of She's Royal by Terrace Riley. I think that's the artist. And I heard it at a community center, like 10th anniversary in the community center at Chris Gibson Community Center. They were just having like a nice like homegrown anniversary party. They played She's Royal. The couple like got up and just like got right into it. And that is my like Brampton memory. Anybody want to share like a song that points you to? Ian, I feel like you have.
Yeah. Because now it's gonna be in my head for the whole night now, right?
Yeah.
But it's like those like early '90s like R&B things, like LL Cool J's. What's that song? I like a girl with extensions in her hair, bamboo earrings, at least 2 pair. Da 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 da.
Round
You know,
away,
you could
girl.
just. What's that?
Round away, girl.
That's right. There's that. There's like all that soul to soul. I've got the power stuff, like just from around that time period, right? I just think summer and polka dot shirts and like overalls with one flap open.
Yes.
Like it's just a whole moment in time, like just encapsulated in like early '90s music. And then there's the flip side of that, which is like everything grunge, like reminds me of like high school and wearing plaid. So
That's Mayfield experiment. So yeah. Trey, song?
I just remember because we were trying to be, you know, cool girls, cool gal, and all of those songs like Coco Bacco Shape, all of those dance hall songs, which were just really inappropriate for high school girls to be listening to, but we knew all of the dances and all of the wines to them. And so it's always going to be dance hall for me. Like for Brampton, it was always going to a Brampton dance and in somebody's basement. And yeah, just, yeah, with a Sarasota bottle. So that's all I remember.
I love it. Louisa.
Oh gosh. So I feel like I have two, like one from when I first moved to middle school, because it was like a brand new experience sort of for me, was, oh, what is it? Give Me the Light by Sean Paul came out when I was like in 6th grade. And so that's like all the Black kids. And I had moved from Mississauga where I was like one of 2 Black kids in my grade. And now coming to Brampton, my entire class, everyone was Black. So I just felt like I was trying to blend in, but not really, because I just stuck out so much. And so that song was everywhere. And then in high school, because I listened to a lot of like rock music and a lot of punk and stuff. And so Fall Out Boy for me will always remind me of high school.
I love that we always have, I feel like as Black folks, we have these songs that like when we were around our own community, it was like, that was our jam. But then when we went to school dances or like the songs that were popular at parties, it was like the other thing. Like my friends were always listening to the Tragically Hip, but that never feels like my music, you know? Okay, so I want to unpack a little bit about your writing and the craft of writing and how that's evolved and changing for you. Before I do that, this is probably gonna be one of my last questions. And so just a heads up, you can put questions in the question and the answer box and we will get to those afterwards. Also, if you have high school songs and you're like, I wanna share mine, you can do that in the chat and we'll come look at your songs afterwards. But I wanna talk about how your writing is evolving and how you're evolving as a writer and the practice. Like, what is it that you're doing that's different and how is it changing for you since you began? And I'll start with you, Trey. Oh, sorry, you're just muted.
I think for me, it's about taking risks and doing different types of writing. You know, like when I first started out, I was doing comedy. And then I felt I was being pigeonholed. So I wrote The Kink and decided to do more dramatic stuff. And then I started doing theater and writing theater and then writing for TV. And then now writing nonfiction with kind of like a memoir piece to the writing with self-help has been something that I was really scared about doing because it wasn't my norm. And I wasn't sure how people were going to receive that and be like, oh, but she's a girl who wrote The Kink and How Black Mothers Say I Love You. And now she's doing this nonfiction. And I think for me, it's always about how you choose to evolve and what speaks to you at that time and not being scared to try something new. And so I feel my writing always reflects where I am in my own personal journey and what matters to me. Like when I wrote The Kink, I was really questioning Blackness and my identities. It was very kind of Black, really focused and gritty and, you know, and hard hitting. And then How Black Mothers Say I Love You was written when my grandmother was dying, and I was really thinking about life and death and memories and how we create those and what we believe. And then How Black Girl in Love with Herself was about my own journey of like, you know, hitting rock bottom and looking at how did I get here? How did my whole life explode in my face and I didn't recognize what to do with it? And why did I give away the job of loving myself to someone else? So it's always about where I am, and what I personally am going through is where my writing goes. And I allow that to happen. And I think it's a natural progression for me.
And there's some like, there's opportunities in your book to write and reflect. And were
Mhm.
those things that you were doing as you were working through the book, or were those things you just sort of said, well, let's make an opportunity at the end? Like, is that something that you had done?
Definitely for me, it's always been about journal space, and it's always been about gratitude, and it's always been about affirming things and writing down my affirmations and manifesting. So I wanted that to be part of the book. That was really important and essential to me. And even in the book as well, about doing my own playlist. Each chapter has a playlist, a music playlist, because music is so essential and such a big part of my life. So I wanted to do things that I felt had always given me comfort, that I felt would resonate with other Black women. And I wanted you to just have those pages right there as you were reading to say, oh, I could jot this down right here. I don't have to go elsewhere and look for it. It's right here. Here's the worksheets. Here's the questions, because that's how I process things, right? Is like, I need it right there, because I will go downstairs and be like, oh, let me get a pen and paper. And then all of a sudden I'm making a cup of tea and then I'm watching Young and the Restless, right? So I wanted to be like, here it is right here. You don't even have to leave the room. You're right here and you can do the work right here with the book.
Oh my gosh, I just heard the theme song of Young. You talk about songs that'll stay in your head. I am now going to hear Young and the Restless in my head for the rest of the evening. Louisa, I know you're at the beginning of a journey in some ways, but you're also like rapidly working through multiple books. So are you seeing, even in sort of the short quickness of your early career, a change in your process and the way you approach your writing?
Yeah, I think so prior to Like Home, I recognized that I was writing a lot of manuscripts that just were not really my voice. Like, they weren't really me. I would read them and I'm like, I don't know. And like, I'd never gotten an agent with them. So I feel like something just wasn't connecting. And then with Like Home and then my second book and all the other stuff I'm working on now, it really feels like I'm just kind of stepping a bit more into an authentic space and like just kind of being a bit more I guess, comfortable using my voice, I think, with writing. There's a lot of opportunities where it feels like that, like I'll just write something that I know people will want to read, or I'll just do it this way because that's kind of what people are telling me will work or whatever. And I find that it just is a lot easier, I think, if I lean on my authenticity. And I think as I kind of have gone through, that's the one thing that's changed. Like, I'm a bit stronger there, but it's also one thing that's really kind of keeping me going, is paying attention to how I'm authentic when I'm writing, and then how I'm kind of showing up in my work.
Ian, craft-wise, you're dipping into different genres and styles and things.
Right.
How are you shifting? I mean, you also teach creative writing. So I'm curious if
Right.
there's things you're teaching your class that might even be shifting as you're doing
Yeah, I feel like I'm always shifting, right? I feel like I'm kind of hard to fix. But the themes are to fix. I guess to pin is a better word. That's a slip if I ever. Um, but I think the subject matter stays in my ballpark, right? You know, I'm interested in culture, in tech, in love, in language. Like, those four things seem to be my pillars. Um, but in terms of process, I think lately, over the last few years or so, my obsessions are the strength of my obsessions are stronger, right? Or deeper. Like, I feel myself drawn to certain areas or certain subjects, and to pursue those things with like almost an insane kind of zeal, right? So I think I'm yielding and allowing myself to pursue things that seem really uh, probably irrelevant to my life as it seems from the outside. But maybe if you ask me questions about, I don't know, construction technology now, I could give you pretty like thorough and deep answers, because that's what I'm working on. So just to like explore without limitation or without this sense of boundary or usefulness. So I feel like my process is becoming more embodied, right? Closer to life. And actually the thing that I'm working on beyond the next novel, I think breaks the boundary between art and life completely, right? So let's see if that could, let's see what happens there.
Okay. I'm going to pull a question, but I have one more question. I lied. I do that a lot. That I wanted to ask you. And I want to ask about the concept of home. Louisa's novel is called Like Home. And I want to ask about what that word means to you. And no pressure, it being called Made in Brampton. You do not have to like, but what does it mean to you? Is it a place? Is it somewhere you've lived and still feels like home? Is it something is it less like a place and more like something bigger? I mean, in this past year of being, especially here in Canada, being home, like in one particular space, sometimes room, what does that word actually mean to you now? Louisa, I picked up your title, so you gotta kick us off.
Yeah. It's so funny because the latest projects I'm working on, that's something, I feel like this is probably just going to be a theme in my work, like belonging and home and all of that. And I think I'm still myself just trying to conceptualize it, like what it means for me. But I think for now, I see it as like a place that I can go to when I'm not feeling that great, if that kind of makes sense. Like just so maybe not like a physical place. It can be a physical place, but it's more like a feeling is kind of what I'm imagining. Like it's a place that I know I can run to when things are kind of not the greatest. That's where I'm currently at. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what it is.
I love it.
Well, I'll say that like home for me, like with Louisa, it's not a physical space either. And home has always been in my head. I think I've moved around too much for it to be physical. Always in my head and kind of like a turtle, right? I feel like I take it around with me wherever I go. And, you know, when I lived in the States, I had a fire and I lost everything. And you see just how quickly a physical space can be altered or destroyed. And so it's like built from the inside. Yeah. Yeah. I think my face in the morning is kind of like what home is. In that bathroom mirror in the morning, in the medicine cabinet. Yeah. That confrontation is home.
Trey, you're the furthest away from this home. So
Yeah.
what does home mean for you?
I think similar to what Ian and Louisa said, for me, I think because I've been such a nomad, and I talk about this a lot in my book, that I've been known to walk around with a knapsack with just my toothbrush and a change of clothing in it. I've just always been ready to go because my life has been shaped like that, of this level of urgency of even as a child, moving from place to place. So I've always been on the move. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned that I used to do that has caused me great harm is trying to find home in other people. And so I write about that in my book, how I now recognize that I need to root myself and find home within myself and not place that on other people, to place myself in their homes or in their lives or them creating home for me, because it feels very unsafe when they then leave, then I have no home, right? So that is something that I've been really learning and trying to figure out, how do I create home within myself and also feel safe knowing that I'm capable of doing that? Because I think for the longest time, I didn't think I was capable of creating home for myself.
I have the like weird privilege of being like a few kilometers away from 90% of my family at all times.
Wow.
And whenever I think about leaving or going to another place, the thing that keeps me home is that proximity. And just like, that is home. It's not a place, it's that distance, that closeness to them that I think defines it for me. We have some great questions, some great comments. A lot of people like very excited to hear about Brampton and about our memories. I have to laugh. One of the comments was like, we need to talk about the Brampton Batman, which I feel like, I don't know, Trey, do you know the Brampton Batman?
No, I know. This was before my time.
Ian, do you know the Brampton Batman?
This is vaguely familiar here.
There is a guy in Brampton, black guy of color. He like has the full costume, the full car. shows up at events like the farmer's market or whatever and just like walks around and people are like, Brampton Batman. It's like this thing. So anyways, shout out to the Brampton Batman for sure. This is a really great question about setting that I think is really relevant to this conversation and also brings in people who may not be from Brampton or know Brampton, but it's about writing setting and events from childhood. But just I think in terms of writing setting in general, they say, do you ever worry about the possibility of getting it wrong? And how do you manage this sort of anxiety that might come with writing memories and writing places that you've been? Anybody feel strongly about that one? Want to take it on? I'm going to pick on you, Ian, because you've written a couple of different settings, especially, I think you were writing the Brampton, Toronto pieces when you were out west too.
Yeah, I actually like writing about a place where I'm not there physically, right? So I'm relying purely on memory. And actually, I don't see it as getting things wrong, right? Because my aim is not to be faithful to represent it exactly. But my aim is to capture something of the essence of like being in that space. So the streets don't have to line up. And the Centennial Mall doesn't have to be the same as what it is, but to capture the essence, I think is more important than to capture, to get the detail right. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself crazy, right? Just from a work point of view, right? Can't.
So you don't like obsess about like how many kilometers to a particular place or like what sign was on the wall across the street.
Right. So, in my head, when I was writing reproduction, I had the grid of like where in Brampton they lived and where the mall was and all of that. But it felt pretty much like just accessing a memory. And, your memory might be off or wrong. But no, I wasn't obsessed. I didn't go to Google Maps and do the street view and all of that, right? So.
Well, there's a question about writing. It was one of the questions I was going to ask anyways. So it's like, what is your perfect writing setting? And you can answer wherever that is. But I also want to know where in Brampton you would go to write. If you could, you can pick a library branch, whatever it is. Where's the perfect spot to write and where in Brampton did you go? Louisa, I'm going to pick on you for this one. Well, at least I'm gonna start
perfect.
there.
I can't. Okay, perfect spot. Before, like in the before times, I used to go to like cafes and stuff, like a Starbucks or something. But in terms of my perfect writing environment, there was a time where before I needed things to be like very quiet, and like lots of lighting, like all like very specific. But I recognized for me that was just me like distracting myself from actually doing work. So now I've been a lot better at just I don't know, like I can kind of write anywhere now. It's a bit strange. And I wonder if that's because of like the pandemic. I'm not too sure. But yeah, it's funny. Like if someone had asked me this question maybe like last year, I would have had a legitimate answer. But now I'm just like, I will write anywhere. Like it does not matter to me. So
I love it. Trey, what about you? Where do you write?
It's funny. I wrote Black Girl in Love with Herself all on my balcony in Atlanta. And I was, I had my patio furniture, couch, comfy couch, a little light blanket, and my juice. And that's kind of how I write. I like to be outside when I write or with a lot of light. And I like writing first thing in the morning. So usually my writing day is anywhere between like 8:30 to 4. That's when I write my most primary stuff. Yeah. So that's for me. Yeah.
I have to pick on you, Ian, because you and I used to have writing meetings at Coffee Culture in downtown.
Yeah, is Coffee Culture still around?
No, it's not. It's not still around. It's even the Starbucks across the street isn't there anymore.
That should be like a cultural preserved place there, right? Get a little plaque on the front there.
We have a really cool like Latino, like Segovia coffee is like the indie space, but like not the original stuff that we use.
It was great, easy to get to, accessible, right at the corner of Main and Queen. And and so first part of reproduction was there. You were writing Gutter Child there at the time. So yeah, good memories of that place.
Memories. We met at the Rose. For those of you watching, we met at the Rose. We both won like Acclaim Awards. And I was like, oh, what's your award for? Because it's for any arts. He's like, oh, I'm a writer. And I'm like, I'm a writer too.
Right.
And we're like, let's be writing buddies. So,
we sat right next to each other just by chance. It was
And you're stuck in the theater, you don't know anybody, your family's sitting somewhere else. So we're
Right.
just like, oh, let's meet at the coffee shop next week and work on our books.
I wonder how many of those like happy accidents actually define people's like, output and careers, right? Like that crossing there, Jael, was really, really essential. I don't know what year it was, but.
Yeah, I don't know. Time, 2014, 13. So this is a question about, this is for Louisa. Themes of loyalty and leaving are integral to your novel. And it led to this reader to wonder about your relationship to Brampton and how that's changed over the years. Do you see yourself living elsewhere? I mean, this is interesting too, because you're the youth amongst us. Ian's gone across the country and kind of back now in Toronto, and Trey has gone south and all over. So are you going somewhere?
Okay, so it's funny because when I first moved to Brampton, admittedly, like I was 11 years old, I was like, oh, I can't stand it because there was nothing where I lived, right? And I think I carried that attitude up until like the end of high school. And it was only after then that things began to shift for me. But then even in terms of living somewhere else, I did have like a little bit of I was going to refer to it as like a quarter life crisis, but just like a bit of a whatever. And I was like, I'm moving, and I moved to England for a year. And then I came back, but coming back was really interesting because it did start to feel a little bit like I had missed this place, and like all these things that before I was like, oh, I don't know about that. I was like, oh, I recognize these things. I feel like a sort of familiarity with them. And I really sort of warmed up to Brampton and all of that, like after I had come back. But in terms of like living somewhere else long-term, I don't know, because I feel like I'm a little bit like you in the sense that I don't want to be too far from my family. I don't know. I guess we'll see how I feel about that in a few years. But for now, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I like the accessibility. I have like a young cousin who I visit like every other week, and he's like 7 years old. So it's just nice to see him grow up and that sort of thing. And I feel like it'd be weird to not be near him specifically. So I don't know. I don't know if I would move anywhere in the near future.
We just got like super personal into your life, Louisa.
I know, like I have a cousin and my family, like it just got very heavy.
Tell me, where will you be living? So this is a really great question from Navi, and I think it's a question about like how we grow Brampton arts and how we create better spaces for Brampton artists. So I'm curious about, and this can be either like, what kind of support would you have liked to have, or kind of things you would have liked to seen when you were here in Brampton that might have helped you, or things that did help you, or things because of all the places you've lived, especially Ian and Trey, that you would love it if that happened here or was here. And maybe I'll put this one because Louisa got really like honed in on in that last one. I'm going to put this one to you too. Yeah.
I really wish that the fold existed when I was in high school, right? Like we had good teachers and all of that, but if I could see that that writers like me existed, or that they could come into our schools and like talk, and we could see their books and all of that. If I knew that writers like were living, right, and available in my city, I think that would have saved me just a lot of like wasted emotional energy about figuring out whether this is a possible life path or how to do this and all of that. Yeah, I always feel like that's a bit of a loss, right? When you burn up like emotional energy instead of artistic and creative energy, like you got to figure out how to be in the world and stuff. So yeah, that's unfortunate.
Instead of like, instead of being pushed because you've seen something and done something, you feel like you're trying to like keep up and climb. It's a very different effort.
Exactly.
Very different exertion. What about you, Trey?
Exactly like what Ian said. I think one of the things that I love the most is going into schools when they're reading my play and books, or students are coming to see my play. And I think about myself, how I remember just being in grade 12 and in my English class begging to read The Color Purple by Alice Walker. And it was such a big deal. And, the teachers were like, oh, we got to go and talk to the principal and see if it's okay because it's not on our reading list and stuff like that. And I'm just thinking like how important it would have been and essential for me to see other Black writers and not fight for it and feel like this is just something that just doesn't happen for us, right? And I think it's so essential for schools and libraries to know how important it is for us as students to see ourselves. I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure Ian has the same experience when I walk into a classroom and they're like, oh my God, you're alive? Like you're a writer and you're alive, right? Like they just expect us to be dead. I don't know why, but a lot of the students expect writers that they're reading, I think especially playwrights, to be dead, right? So I just think it's just a whole different way of moving through the world when you know it's possible for you, when you see other writers like you who look like you.
It's so funny you say that though, because I think it makes sense that they think that the writers are dead because so many of them are reading books and plays by people who have been dead for a really long time. Like it's amazing to me the things that are still being taught in high school sometimes. I'm like, really? So it makes sense that when you introduce somebody who's alive, it's like, what? That happens? There's a really great question that I want to use to wrap up our conversation today, which is, first of all, I want to give a shout out. This is my stack of Brampton books that I pulled off my shelf today. And it's not even all of them. Trey, I don't have yours because I have yours on my phone. So I didn't know how to do that. But it's here. It's here. But this is just some of the Brampton writers. I posted a picture of it on the Fold account. So if you want to get a closer look, you can see some of them there. It's not even all of them, actually. I realized some of them aren't even there. But I want to ask you about the books that are influencing you right now, the ones that are really hitting you and impacting you. Who are they? Give a shout out, spread the love. I will start with the person who seems most ready, and both Ian and Trey looked away at that exact moment. So Louisa, you win.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out, okay, so I literally have just started reading this Hurricane Summer, like this morning. And the author, she is a Black author from Toronto, actually. And because currently I'm writing a story about like the larger themes are like loneliness and abandonment, all of that. And I'm not even halfway into this book, but I'm just like, oh my God, this is very similar to the feeling that I'm trying to capture in words. And so it's been really eye-opening, like just to kind of read how the writer conceptualizes like loneliness and abandonment I'm only like a quarter in, so like in such a short amount of time. And I don't know, I'm really excited to finish it. I feel like when I finish it, it will be very devastating for me. I'll probably cry, but I'm excited.
You know what's so good is keep that book handy, because when you're writing yours, you can use it as like a
right.
I got this. This is kind of how you do it. I call them buddy books, a book that like you use as you're writing your book to help you like get through slumps or questions.
Yeah.
Ian, what do you what's hitting you these days?
Well, I'm just going to say what I'm reading right now, right? So just before the event here, I'm reading Viet Thanh Nguyen, and I'm speaking with him next week, The Committed. So that's his new book. And about halfway through it, it's wild, right? You know, when those are like genre bending kinds of books. Yeah, and written like from the inside of an experience. It just goes to prove like you don't need to get every reference. You don't need to understand everything in order to appreciate a book, right? But it's the kind of book where your eyes open up just a little bit more because of this person's like expertise there. So that's what I'm reading right now.
And is that for Vancouver Writers Fest?
That's for Vancouver Writers Fest next Sunday, right?
Yeah. So shout out to Vancouver Writers Fest. They do great events there. I felt the same way when I read Shun King's You Are Eating an Orange, You Are Naked. I was like, what is this magic? How is this happening? And it really like bent my mind. Trey, I feel like you're going to come up with a nonfiction. I feel like it, but maybe
I am. I just finished reading Roxane Gay, Hunger, which I really loved and enjoyed. And then I've been finishing this one, Patsy, which I love because it's a story about immigration of this Black woman who comes from Jamaica, and it has a queer angle to it, which I really loved. Like I was just like, oh my God, there's a queer Jamaican lesbian love story by somebody not me, right? So I was very excited about that. So I'm really enjoying reading this book. And she's talking about the whole migration experience of a woman who leaves her child behind in Jamaica to come and pursue, you know, a woman who she fell in love with when she was younger. So I just thought it's really a good book.
I love that. I love that. It has been an absolute pleasure to spend my evening with the three of you. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time to be with us at the Fold. Good luck with your writing. I know some of you are going to join us in the chat afterwards. I know Trey just had her vaccine, so we're going to put no pressure on her to appear afterwards. She's
Thank
just
you.
holding on.
Barely,
So thank you so
barely.
much. Thank you so much for being here. You were all brilliant. And I
you.
will be in the chat with you after for sure.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you.
Just a few closing remarks. This is a picture of where the festival will be held next year. Hopefully, everybody, fingers crossed. That's the Garden Square. And also in the bottom right corner, right was where Coffee Culture is, where Ian and I used to hang out and write our stories. All the books by today's authors and all of the Fold authors are available through Another Story Bookshop, our bookseller for the festival. You can order with free shipping from them for up until May 15th, and you'll get some special goodies, some bookmarks, a postcard, this particular postcard, which includes a quote by Eden Robinson. Also available, we have Fold audiobooks that are available through Audible Canada, and you can find that link in the lobby. We also have a brand new Power of Poetry Moods That Move project with Audible, which is an album of spoken word artists, many of them from Brampton. You can see the ads and the promos on Audible Canada's social media and on our social media over the next few weeks. You can download that and listen to that whenever you want. Shout out to our Brampton poets who are on there, as well as our other poets. The other thing I'll just mention before we go is that you can support the Fold. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I forgot to mention the hashtag Fold 2021 at the beginning, I think, but you can post pictures and comments from today. And you can post things, what you're doing, what you're watching, and who you're watching with. You can also subscribe to our newsletters to stay up to date. You can continue to support the work of the Fold by making a charitable donation of any amount at thefoldcanada.org/donate. Last thing is where to go now. This is our lobby. When you're done a panel discussion at the Rose, we exit out into the lobby and we chat and we laugh and we talk about all the things that made us think. And so today you can do that by going to the lounge and clicking on the red square that says session discussions. And that's where the chat will open up and you can talk with me. Louisa will be there. I think Ian's going to come. We told Trey to take a rest. The vaccine was working its magic. So we hope to see you there. Thanks so much for being here.